Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the studio. It is a pleasure to have you here. Now, today I'm going to do something a little bit different and set myself a little bit of a challenge. I'm going to paint these seashells and create a Vanitas style of painting. Now, Vanitas is a type of still life where the subject is bathed with quite a lot of light and the background is usually pretty dark, black. Yes, there is crumpled paper in the background. I'll explain. Now, before I lay down all my colors, I'm gonna go ahead and sketch this in loosely with a combination of alizarin crimson and lamp black. Now here I am working on a canvas panel primed with acrylic gesso, and I have also given it a acrylic burnt sienna undertone. I've given it 24 hours to dry, and the next day I have a perfect painting surface. Now here I'm going to sketch in the composition loosely with the same combination of alizarin crimson and black. Now the first stage of this painting I did sketch it in completely by life, but later down I did use reference photos. That's because I didn't have the natural light available for the still life. Yes, the placement of the still life was done using natural light, so I only had a limited time period to sketch this in. Now after the initial SketchUp, I decided to go ahead and lay down all my colors on the palette. And the colors I have laid down on the palette consists of burnt sienna, burnt umber, yellow ochre, cadmium yellow, titanium white, cadmium red, alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, cobalt blue, and a little bit of mid green. At the last moment I did end up using black. Now I'm gonna mix up some background color here with a combination of lamp black, ultramarine blue, burnt umber, and a little bit of mid green. Now this is gonna give me a toned down dark color for that initial background. The brushes I'm using here are quite big for the size of this canvas, so my first step is to go ahead and block this in. That is to get everything down before I start the detail stage. I don't want that burnt sienna ground to be seen, so I go ahead and block this in with color. Now unfortunately I can't pop up the pictures I used here for the sea corals because they are copyrighted. I found them on Google, so I can't really pop them up here, but I'm not copying them exactly how it is. I'm also using the reference photo I shot as a guide with that, but I am using a couple of reference photos I found online just to give me a little bit of an idea of how these sea corals would look like, because I haven't seen one in real life, so it helps a lot to have good reference photos available. Now I do see some dark tone, so I go ahead and add in a little bit of green, burnt sienna, burnt umber, and I mix all of this in with yellow ochre, and it gives me this beautiful dull down yellow color. Now I have to make sure the initial block in is pretty dark so I can lay down the lights on top of it. I saved the best for last, and that is to add in all the final bright pops of detail, bright highlights. I keep them at the last stage of the painting, just like a treat. So I make sure to get everything down in its place before I add in that final detail. Now you may be wondering why I went with a vertical composition. Well, I was particularly inspired by this painting of Anne Villea Costa, and I really love all the sea corals in the background. So that's the effect I was going for, and that's what inspired me to do this painting in the first place. So my initial thought was to do this in a horizontal composition, but then I decided to go ahead and add in more space for the sea corals or sea fans that you see in the background, and that is crumpled paper. Now, I did not have any sea corals or sea fans in my collection, so I decided to go ahead and add crumpled paper in the background just to give me an idea of how it would look and how the lighting would affect it in the still life. So that is the purpose of the crumpled paper in the setup. I'm also gonna add in a couple of these red sea corals or sea sticks right next to this beautiful big shell here. Now, as I finish in the block-in, I'm gonna go ahead and add in the details, starting with the sea coral in the back. Now let's go ahead and mix up some dark color for this. I'm gonna add a little bit of texture and interest to the sea corals. So I'm using black, combination of green, burnt umber, burnt sienna, and also ultramarine blue. Now, I don't want this black to be too strong. I want to dull it down as much as possible, so most of the effect is gone. I don't want the black to be too strong on the painting that captures the attention of the viewer. So I go ahead and dull it down with these other mixes, and I also mix in a few lighter grays. Now you can clearly see some reference photos on my tab right next to the painting here, and as you can see, the sea corals have a particular texture to them. They have these holes inside them, and trying to capture this was actually a bit of a challenge because I had to go individually and mark in each and every single one of these holes, and they had to be pretty random. Now this took a long time to do. Capturing this was not easy. Everything had to be pretty random. If I had any organization or any similarities between the marks, it would look unnatural. Most of these holes, these texture had to be pretty random here and there. Now I did notice these sea fans had these veins through the middle of their structure, and these beautiful orange looking corals coming out of them. Now I had too much fun painting this in. This is quite challenging and also quite fun to paint. I go back in with white bright highlights and add in the texture between those black holes that I see in the sea corals. Now I'm gonna mark in the rest of the texture and the holes with the same combination of yellow ochre and titanium white, and I'm gonna go back in with black and fill those up. This took hours and I had quite a lot of fun painting it. I also see a little bit of red popping through, so I add that in. This is a combination of cadmium red, alizarin crimson, and burnt sienna. Again, going back in with that black, this is gonna add in that life and give it that sense of texture and interest to the sea corals. I'm using a pretty small brush for this. This is a synthetic round. Now there is this saying when it comes to painting, and it goes like, paint what you see, not what you know. Now let me explain what that is, okay? Now you know that these seashells here, at least the one here, the big one here, we know it's white, right? Now that's not what we see, do we? We see a lot of different colors here. Now you take a look at that reference photo closely that I've popped up here. You see it is pretty different. It's pretty far away from white. except to those bright highlights, I see a lot of different colors, including grey, burnt sienna, black. I even see a little bit of yellow ochre here and there. So I'm gonna go ahead and map this in with the colors I see and not what I know. If I just go ahead and block this in with just pure white, it's gonna look pretty boring and flat. Now it is time to revisit the seashells and add detail right over the block in. I'm using a round brush loaded with burnt sienna and a little bit of burnt umber for this particular shell here. I'm going to start off by adding in the spots you can see on the reference photo given on hand, and slowly add in the bright white details. This is the part of the painting I really look forward to. Now I'm gonna take a very slow and methodical approach here. If I rush this, I will end up making mistakes, and that will ultimately ruin the painting. Now here you can see me adding in the final white details on top of this seashell. Now this is pure titanium white with a little bit of linseed oil. I really love this particular seashell here. It has a lot of interest and dark texture to it. Now, some of you are probably wondering how I am able to capture each and every single one of these shells with the bright highlight on them. Well, that's because I've held back with my tones. This simply just means that I'm not going too dark or I'm not going too bright. I'm somewhere in between that range. Say for example, I am not just using pure titanium white and going on top of these shells. That will make them too bland and too, boring looking. And also I'm not mustering my darkest darks and going on top of them. Now that I've said that, notice this bright white seashell right in front of you. Notice it's contrasting against the dark spots of the seashell right behind it. This is how I'm able to capture light and dark in my painting. Now let's go ahead and finish off this spotted tun shell. Yes, that's right. This is called a spotted tunna. I don't know how to pronounce that. I just looked it up, but I'll pop it up on the screen. Just please excuse my pronunciation. I don't know how to pronounce that. Alright, let's go ahead and paint. Now the tip of the shell I have is broken off. That's why there is a big hole right in the middle of it. So, and there is the shadow reflecting off of that hole. So what I am doing here is basically filling in that burnt sienna gap on the canvas with a little bit of yellow ochre mixed with cadmium yellow. I've been waiting for this moment to add in that final detail on this particular shell. I really love the spots that this shell has on top of it. It adds a lot of interest and texture to the shell. As the painting progresses, so do the brushes. I'm using extremely small round brushes here. At the beginning of the block-in stage, I was using pretty big brushes for the size of this canvas here. But now here I'm using synthetic round brushes that are extremely small for detail. Now sit back, relax, we'll roll some music here. I'll let you enjoy the rest of this video. Now I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm extremely grateful if you have made it this far into the video. I'll see you all in the next one.